A man on the brink of death, brought into the emergency room with no ID, no name, and no memory of his past. As doctors fought to save him, they also tried to uncover who he was. But when the truth finally emerged, it left everyone shaken. Who was this man? And more importantly, why was someone trying to keep his past buried? Before we dive, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And while you're here, hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe so you never miss a story that will leave you speechless. Now let's get into it. It started like any other night at the hospital. The emergency room was busy with patients. Doctors rushed between rooms and nurses kept the chaos under control. But nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. At exactly 12:03 a.m., the blaring sirens of an ambulance shattered the night's routine. The hospital staff turned their attention to the ER entrance as paramedics wheeled in a man, covered in blood, his face barely recognizable from the injuries. His pulse was weak, his breathing shallow. Dr. Michael Carter, one of the hospital's top trauma surgeons, wasted no time. "Let's get him stabilized," he ordered. Nurse Emily Walker sprinted alongside the stretcher, checking his vitals. But something was off. This man had no identification, no wallet, no phone, no way to tell who he was. Most disturbing of all, no one came looking for him. As the team worked tirelessly to save him, they didn't realize they were about to step into one of the most chilling mysteries they had ever encountered. The first thing he noticed was the beeping, rhythmic, steady, a faint, distant sound that seemed to be calling him back from somewhere dark and endless. His eyelids felt heavy, as though they had been sealed shut for days. With great effort, he forced them open. Bright, too bright. The overhead fluorescent lights burned his vision, making him squint. Slowly, the room came into focus. A sterile white ceiling, walls lined with medical equipment, and the lingering scent of antiseptic in the air. Then, the pain hit. A dull, throbbing ache pulsed through his skull, radiating from the back of his head. His body felt sore, as if he had been hit by a truck. His arms were weak, covered in IV lines. He tried to move, but even shifting an inch sent sharp jolts of pain through his limbs. He wasn't alone. A man in a white coat stood beside him, studying him carefully. His expression was calm, yet serious, like someone assessing a fragile situation. Next to him, a young woman in navy blue scrubs held a clipboard, her eyes filled with concern. The man in the white coat leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but firm. "You're in a hospital," he said. "You were in a car accident." "A hospital? A car accident?" The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else's reality. The doctor continued. "Can you tell me your name?" The question hung in the air. Silence. The man in the bed blinked, his mind racing. His name. His name. It should have been the easiest thing in the world to recall, but when he reached for it, there was nothing. His breath quickened, his brow furrowed in confusion. His lips parted slightly, but the words refused to come. Michael, the doctor, exchanged a quick glance with the nurse. "Sir?" the nurse, Emily, prompted gently. Still nothing. The man's chest rose and fell rapidly, panic creeping into his eyes. His fingers curled into the sheets, gripping them tightly as if grounding himself to reality. He struggled to form a thought, his voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I don't know." Emily's heart sank. Michael kept his voice steady. "That's okay. Try to relax," he reassured him. "Do you remember anything? Your family? Where you live?" The man shut his eyes tightly, trying desperately to reach into the void of his mind. Nothing, not a single memory, no images, no names, no faces. The frustration built inside him like a storm, a suffocating weight pressing against his chest. His hands trembled. Why can't I remember?" His voice cracked, his frustration barely contained. Emily took a step closer, her voice soft. "Sometimes after head trauma, memory loss can happen," she said. "It might come back with time." But even as she spoke, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "What if it doesn't?" The next 48 hours were critical. Medically, he was stable. His body had begun healing from the accident. His wounds were stitched, his bruises fading. But the biggest mystery remained unsolved. Who was he? His lack of identification made things even more complicated. No wallet, no phone, no emergency contacts, nothing. Jack Miller, the hospital's head of security, had taken it upon himself to dig for answers. He scoured police reports, checked missing persons databases, even contacted hospitals in nearby cities. No match. It was as if this man had never existed. And that wasn't even the most disturbing part. No one came looking for him. Days passed, still no visitors, no frantic phone calls, no family reporting him missing. That was the moment it truly hit them. Whoever he was completely alone. Emily, ever the optimist, refused to believe the memories were gone forever. They had to be there, buried deep inside his mind. She spent time by his bedside, asking gentle questions, hoping something, anything, would spark recognition. "Do you remember any names, even a first name?" He shook his head. "A place, a city, a face?" His eyes darkened with frustration. Nothing. Each failed attempt chipped away at his hope, but Emily refused to give up. One afternoon, she tried something different. She handed him a pen and a notepad and placed it in his hands. "Just write," she encouraged, "even if it doesn't make sense." He hesitated, staring down at the blank paper. His fingers tightened around the pen. For a long moment, he did nothing. Then, almost as if his body remembered something his mind had forgotten, he started writing. His movements were slow, hesitant. The pen scratched softly against the paper, forming jagged, uneven letters. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she watched. When he finally stopped, he stared at the word he had written, his face pale. Emily picked up the notepad and turned it toward her. One word: danger. Emily's stomach dropped. Michael, reading over her shoulder, felt his entire body tense. Jack, who had just walked into the room, froze in place. Danger. The word sat heavy in the air, filling the room with an unspoken dread. Emily's grip on the notepad tightened. "What does this mean?" she asked carefully. The man stared at the word, his expression troubled. "I don't know," he admitted. His voice was barely a whisper. "I just wrote it." His fingers twitched, as if he wanted to grab the pen again, but he didn't. Jack cleared his throat. "Do you think it's a memory?" The man exhaled shakily. "I don't know," he repeated. "It just came to me." Michael crossed his arms, his mind racing. "Are you in danger?" he asked. The man flinched. Jack narrowed his eyes. "Or are we?" Silence. Emily suddenly felt cold. Until that moment, she had assumed this man was an innocent victim, a lost soul with no past. But what if he wasn't? What if he was dangerous? Or worse, what if someone wanted him erased? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, and for the first time since the patient arrived at the hospital, she wasn't sure if they had saved a man in need or invited something far more dangerous into their lives. At first, everyone at the hospital thought this was just another tragic case, an unfortunate man suffering from head trauma, lost in his own mind. Patients like him came through the emergency room doors all the time, injured, disoriented, needing care. But as time passed, the mystery surrounding him only deepened. Jack Miller, the hospital's head of security, had spent years dealing with missing persons cases. There was always a paper trail. Someone always left behind a clue, a hospital admission, an old-eyed, a concerned relative filing a missing persons report. But this time, nothing. Jack combed through every database he had access to. Missing persons reports, no match. Police databases, no match. Fingerprints, nothing. It was as if this man had been plucked out of thin air. Jack wasn't one to believe in conspiracies, but this wasn't normal. Something wasn't right. Emily Walker, the night shift nurse assigned to him, couldn't shake the unease creeping up her spine. The word the patient had written, danger, echoed in her mind. It didn't feel random. It felt like a warning. But warning about what? If his memory wouldn't return on its own, maybe they could trigger something. One afternoon, Emily walked into his room with a notepad and a pen. She placed them gently in his hands. "Write anything that comes to mind," she encouraged, her voice soft, "even if it doesn't make sense." The man hesitated, his hand trembling slightly. For a moment, his eyes darted around the room as if searching for something unseen. Then, as if guided by instinct, he put the pen to paper. Emily watched, her breath catching in her throat. One word, then another, and another. When he finally stopped, she hesitated before picking up the paper. Her blood ran cold. Run, hide, trust no one. A shiver crawled down her spine. Emily's grip on the notepad tightened. She took a slow, deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "Do you remember writing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man stared at the paper, his face pale. He swallowed hard before shaking his head. I don't know where that came from," he admitted. His voice was hoarse, uncertain. Emily immediately called Michael and Jack into the room. Jack's expression darkened as he read the note. "This isn't just some accident victim," he muttered. "Someone erased this guy's past on purpose." That night, Jack decided to review the hospital's security footage. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, Maybe someone had come to visit the patient. Maybe there was a detail they had overlooked. But what he found sent ice through his veins. At 3:17 a.m., the camera outside the patient's room captured a shadowy figure. A person in dark clothing slipped silently into the room. Their face was obscured, hidden beneath the hood of their jacket. They weren't a doctor. They weren't a nurse. They weren't supposed to be there. Jack's pulse quickened as he watched the footage. The intruder moved carefully, deliberately. They weren't just visiting, they were searching for something. Then just before they left, they placed something on the patient's bedside table. Jack's stomach twisted. He hit pause, zooming in on the small slip of paper. A note. Without wasting another second, Jack bolted from his chair and sprinted to the patient's room. When he arrived, Emily was already there, holding the note. Her hands trembled as she read it aloud. "Do not help him. You are in danger." Silence. Michael's jaw tightened. Jack clenched his fists. The weight of those words pressed down on them like an invisible force. Whoever this man was, someone didn't want him to remember. And worse, whoever left this note was still out there, watching, waiting. The next day, the hospital received an unexpected visitor. A man in his late 50s, dressed in an expensive suit, walked through the front entrance. He didn't stop at the reception desk. He didn't ask questions. He moved with purpose, straight toward the patient's room. Emily was adjusting the IV line when she saw the suited man step into the doorway. She froze, and then something strange happened. The patient, who had barely shown any emotion for days, suddenly stiffened. His eyes locked onto the visitor, and for the first time since arriving at the hospital, there was recognition. The man in the suit, his face went pale. He didn't speak. He didn't introduce himself. Instead, he turned and walked right out. Jack had been watching from the security desk. Immediately, his instincts kicked in. He followed. The man in the suit moved quickly, heading toward the exit. Jack caught up with him just as he reached the parking lot. "Hey," Jack called out. "Who are you?" The man hesitated. His grip tightened on the car keys in his hand. For a brief moment, it seemed like he might ignore Jack entirely. Then finally he spoke. He was supposed to be dead. Jack's blood ran cold. "Dead?" he repeated. "What do you mean?" The man exhaled sharply, his expression unreadable. "Look, I can't tell you everything, but if I were you, I'd stop asking questions." Jack's jaw tightened. "Why? Who is he?" The man turned and stared at the hospital, as if weighing his words carefully. Then with a grim expression, he said, "You don't want to know." Without another word, he climbed into his car and drove away. That night, something changed. The patient, who had spent weeks in a fog of confusion, suddenly began to remember. Flashes of images, voices, a past he didn't ask for, but one that refused to stay buried. When Emily checked on him, she noticed his hands were shaking. "Are you okay?" she asked. He didn't respond right away. Then, in a low, steady voice, he said something that sent chills down her spine. "For your own safety, forget you ever met me." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she whispered. The man turned to face her, and for the first time, his gaze was intense. "There are people out there who don't want me to exist," he said. "And if you keep digging, they'll come for you too." Emily swallowed hard, but before she could finish, he grabbed her hand. His grip was firm, urgent. "Promise me," he whispered. "Forget me." And then, just like that, he vanished. By morning, his hospital bed was empty. No one saw him leave. No sign of forced entry. It was as if he had never been there at all. The hospital felt different that night. The usual hum of medical machines, the rhythmic footsteps of nurses making their rounds, all of it seemed muted, almost suffocated by an unnatural stillness. The air was thick, heavy with an eerie silence that wrapped around the halls like an invisible fog. It was the kind of quiet that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Something was coming. Jack Miller, the hospital's head of security, leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the glowing monitors in front of him. His fingers drummed lightly against the desk, but his posture was tense. He had seen strange cases before, but this was different. The unidentified man, the patient with no past, had just started regaining pieces of his memory, and now someone wanted him gone. Jack rewound the day's security footage again, staring at the screen. The moment the suited man saw the patient played on a loop in his mind. The fear, the shock. What had he seen? What did he know? Jack was about to switch to another angle when the hospital's power flickered. A brief blackout. Every screen in front of him went dark for 3 full seconds. Then the backup generators kicked in. The emergency lights bathed the hospital in a dull red glow. Jack's heart pounded. His radio crackled to life. "Jack, We need you in the ICU, now." It was Emily, and she sounded terrified. Jack ran. His feet barely touched the ground as he sprinted toward the ICU. As he turned the corner, he heard a noise. A muffled struggle. Jack's instincts kicked in. He shoved open the door to the patient's room and stopped cold. The room was in chaos. The patient? Gone. The bed was empty. The thin sheets were torn from the mattress, tangled on the floor. The IV stand had been knocked over, a slow drip of fluid pooling near the overturned chair. And Emily? She was pinned against the wall, her eyes wide with fear. A gloved hand covered her mouth, muffling her screams. A masked man dressed in all black had her restrained, his grip firm, calculated. He wasn't just holding her back, he was eliminating a witness. Jack didn't think, he acted. With one swift motion, he grabbed a metal tray from the nearby table and slammed it into the attacker's head. The sharp clang of impact echoed through the room. The masked man staggered, his grip on Emily loosening just enough. She reacted instantly. A sharp elbow to his ribs, a desperate kick to his leg. The man stumbled. Jack didn't wait. He tackled him, slamming him to the ground with brutal force. The man fought back hard, his movements trained, tactical, a professional. But Jack was stronger, faster. With a final punch, the intruder's body went limp. Jack ripped the mask off. The face beneath it was unfamiliar, but the tattoo on his wrist wasn't. A small, intricate symbol. Military, intelligence. Jack and Emily exchanged glances, both breathing hard. This wasn't random. This was coordinated. Whoever this patient was, he wasn't just a nobody. And now, someone wanted him erased. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for the overturned clipboard on the floor. A sheet of paper had fallen loose. The patient had written something before everything went dark. Her fingers tightened around the paper as she lifted it. 3 words. "They are coming." Jack exhaled sharply. This wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Emily looked up, fear flashing across her face. "Where is he?" Jack grabbed the radio strapped to his belt. "Security, do we have eyes on—" The radio crackled, then went dead. Jack's stomach twisted. Something was very, very wrong. His eyes darted to the security monitors mounted on the wall. The footage was glitching, but one frame came through. A single, distorted image. The patient was in the stairwell, and he wasn't alone. 2 more figures, both in black, were following him. Jack's pulse surged. He grabbed Emily's wrist. "We have to stop them." They bolted for the stairwell, but by the time they reached the doors, the patient was gone. No footprints, no trail, nothing. It was as if he had vanished into the night, just like a ghost. 2 days passed. The hospital remained on edge. Security was tightened. Michael and Emily tried to go back to normal, but they couldn't. The patient was gone. The intruder had disappeared from police custody before he could be questioned. Too many loose ends. Too many questions without answers. Then one morning, Emily went out to check her mailbox. It was early. The world was still quiet. A soft breeze rustled the trees as she reached for the stack of envelopes. And then she saw it. A single, unmarked envelope. No return address. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. Inside, there was only one thing. A handwritten note. The handwriting was familiar. "Thank you. Stay safe." Emily's breath hitched. Her hands gripped the paper so tightly it nearly crumpled. She turned it over. No signature, no explanation, nothing. Just those 4 words. Michael, standing beside her, whispered the question that haunted them both. Who was he? And more importantly, would they ever see him again? Days passed, but the weight of what had happened never faded. The hospital carried on, its halls once again filled with the steady hum of machines, the hurried footsteps of doctors, and the hushed voices of nurses. Patients came and went. Life moved forward. But for those who had witnessed the mystery firsthand, nothing felt normal anymore. Michael Carter couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The patient, the man they had fought so hard to save, had simply vanished. No discharge papers, no official transfer, no trace of his existence. It was as if he had been nothing more than a ghost. No police report, no media coverage, no mention of the attack. Emily Walker still found herself pausing outside room 307, staring at the empty hospital bed through the half-open door, half expecting to see him there. But deep down, she knew he was never coming back. And Jack Miller? He had worked security for years. He had seen violence, threats, break-ins, but this case would haunt him forever. The man had been in their care for weeks, yet they never truly knew who he was. A victim, a fugitive, a ghost from the past. But what haunted them most was the unanswered question, why had someone wanted him dead? Jack refused to let it go. The moment he stepped back into his office, he dove into every possible lead. Missing persons databases, intelligence records, international crime reports. Nothing. Not a single trace of the man who had been lying in that hospital bed just days before. It didn't make sense. Jack had been certain that arresting the masked intruder from the ICU would lead to answers. That should have been wrong. By the time the authorities processed his arrest, he was gone too, transferred, before Jack could ask a single question. No records, no trial, no explanation. Jack clenched his jaw. Who had the power to make people disappear like that? One thing was clear. This wasn't just a random case. The patient hadn't been forgotten. He had been erased. Emily couldn't stop thinking about him, the way he had suddenly vanished, the way he had warned her to forget him. She replayed everything that had happened in her mind, the suited man who ran at the sight of him, the masked men who had tried to take him, the note left in his room warning her not to help him. It all pointed to one thing, a past that someone wanted buried. Then, her mailbox changed everything. It was early morning, the world was still quiet, bathed in a soft golden hue as she stepped outside heading toward the mailbox like she did every morning. She expected bills, junk mail, hospital notices, but when she pulled open the metal door, her heart stopped. A plain white envelope sat inside. No return address, no postage stamp. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. Slowly, she tore it open, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. The message was handwritten. Her breath hitched as she read the words, "Thank you. Stay safe." Emily's hands tightened around the note. The handwriting was familiar. It was him. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears as she turned sharply, scanning the street. Was he watching? Had he been there just moments ago waiting for her to find it? She scanned every car, every doorway, every shadow, but the street was empty. Just an ordinary morning. Yet, she knew. He was out there somewhere, watching, moving, hiding. Maybe he was running from something. Maybe he was protecting someone. Maybe he was protecting them. But Emily couldn't help but wonder, was he truly a good man? Or had they unknowingly saved someone with a past better left buried? The hospital staff never spoke of him again, not because they didn't care, but because some mysteries were safer left unsolved. Michael, Emily, and Jack each held onto their own theories. Was he a rogue agent, a witness in hiding, someone who had betrayed powerful people? Maybe one day the truth would come out, or maybe it was buried for a reason. One thing was certain, some secrets should never be uncovered. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved. And some people, they vanish for a reason. But what do you think? Was he an innocent man caught in a dangerous past? Or was he someone the world was better off forgetting? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another mystery.